That's great. Thank you, Mark. So as Mark introduced me to all of you, my name is Mary-Louise Cushnahan. I'm a Microsoft Certified Trainer with SureSkills. So you're all very welcome to this webinar on visual storytelling with PowerPoint. So hopefully the presentation will take around 30 minutes or so, and then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So yeah, you should be finished. We should be finished no later than 12 today. So let me go into the first slide. What I'm going to do is just turn my camera off because the session is being recorded. So I'll just do that now. And the recording has started. But as Mark pointed out, when we get to the Q&A, we'll stop the recording at that stage. So the topics for the webinar today are what is storytelling. So we're just going to go into just a couple of slides to discuss storytelling from the point of view of, developing your presentation, and then of course using PowerPoint to deliver that presentation. We'll discuss some tips for design of your presentations within PowerPoint, and then I'll show you some how-tos within PowerPoint itself to just enable that visual storytelling using PowerPoint. So we'll look at inserting some images and illustrations. So just exploring what you can insert into slides to give you that visual storytelling to help with that. Converting text to smart art, using slide transitions and animating slides, and creating and editing slide layouts. As Mark said, these sessions are primarily taster sessions to whet your appetite. It's not the full how-to of each of these topics, but it'll give you a flavor of, storytelling, just a bit of background on what storytelling is, particularly for a presentation, and then that visual representation within PowerPoint itself. So I'm going to start with what is storytelling. So I have, looked at a couple of sources for some quotes on what storytelling is, particularly from the point of view of presentations. This source is from Microsoft 365, the life hacks on presentations. So storytelling at its core means giving your audience a plot or path to follow that is both compelling and satisfying. And the best stories connect to something universal, spark curiosity, enhance the way we see the world. So from the point of view of the elements of a good story, any good story, we have to set the scene. So most stories happen in a physical space. So what you really want to do within your PowerPoint presentation is to start your presentation with this same sense of place to ground your audience and draw their attention away from what might be distracting them. You want to drop your audience into the world of your presentation. So what do they need to know to start that journey and join you on that journey through the presentation? So what you'll think about is using visuals, audio, maybe a few words to set the scene, to give your audience context and backdrop for the adventure ahead then of the story. So if we bring it back to the workplace in terms of setting the scene, the scene in the workplace could be a company and your competitive landscape. Every good story needs a hero. So the hero in our story, which is our company and our competitive landscape, is our employees, or are our employees. Another element of a good story then is the journey they're going to take with you. So again, just thinking of this example of our company and our competitive landscape, we're thinking of the journey of the history of our company, where we are currently today, and what we're going to be doing in the future. And with this, what you'll do is you'll look at the data and you'll try and turn that data into insights then. We then have the turning point within the story. That'll be your big idea in the presentation. And from the point of view of the employees, we'll tell them you're smashing it, keep doing what you're doing, from the point of view of our competitive landscape to improve that. And then the last element of a good story is the resolution. So give the audience a direction to follow after the presentation, which is really a call to action then from that presentation. So thinking about what your presentation the story that you're telling in that presentation, think of those elements, and these elements make up a good story. So the actual presentation itself, you want to structure your presentation like a story. So you need to think about crafting the beginning. So part of that craft the beginning is setting the scene, where the journey begins then. So not only setting the scene, but provide context. So what you'll think about is giving the audience two key story components, the main character and the problem to be resolved. So what problem does your presentation address? What's at stake? Who stands to gain or lose? And draw viewers into your presentation by making them care about someone or something and make sure they know what hangs in the balance. So that's your craft the beginning. So then you need to develop the middle, just like any story, and that's the winding way forward. So in the middle, you dig into the complexities of the plot-driven problem as you work your way through it and lead viewers or the audience towards a new understanding or way of being. And that section is really about deepening the sense of need and are widening the promise of possibility as we cross the terrain from where we started to our ultimate destination. So let your audience experience the challenges and obstacles at the heart of the problem and give them a fuller picture of what can be won or lost. And then the end of your journey, make the ending powerful. The road ends, but you want the journey to stick with the audience. So as the journey concludes, you reflect on what's been lost, gained, and learned. What do you know now, and how does that change your perception and actions going forward? So you've made it through the complexity, through the dramatic feats, and you arrive at a new place of understanding. Finally, resolving the problem that drove us on this journey and seeing the new landscape and opportunities around us. So make the journey stick with the audience after you've done presenting by ending on a resonating image, line, or idea that amplifies the main takeaway or action you want them to do next. And again, think of that call to action. The source for that structuring comes from Harvard Business Review, structure your presentation like a story. So very interesting article to read just on how to structure your presentation like a story. So thinking about the beginning, the middle, and the end. But think of those key elements of setting the scene, your hero, and then the journey, the turning point, and the end, the resolution. So what I want to do is think about some tips to help you. Okay, so you've crafted your story and you then want to translate that story into a PowerPoint presentation. And really there are some tips for design that will help translate that story into your PowerPoint presentation. First thing to think about is using layout to your advantage, and actually one of the topics that we will cover shortly in the webinar is actually to look at a slide layout. So using layout to your advantage. What you can think about in terms of your slide layout is that most Western languages, we read from left to right and top to bottom, okay? So knowing this natural reading order, you can start to direct people's eyes in a deliberate way to certain key points of the slide that you want to emphasize. Using layout is a simple and effective way to control the flow and the visual hierarchy of information on the slide. So if you have text heavier slides, you want to control what your audience reads first by aligning the text, flush left, increasing the point size, coloring key lines. And what that'll do is direct the audience to the most important information first and make the slide more scannable then for your audience. So what you might think about is making a focal point with color, but keep it to simple light and dark colors. Denote the importance of a point on the slide with size and scale. And you're talking maybe 30-point font size or larger again. The fonts that would be recommended within a PowerPoint presentation would be sans serif fonts, and those are fonts like Helvetica, Tahoma, and Verdana. And try and stick to one or at the most two fonts, and use contrast then for focusing, but avoid overstyling with bold, italic, and color, etc. Okay. So those first 2 points, using layout to your advantage, choosing your fonts wisely, really can be key to the design of the slides within the presentation itself. So remembering we read from left to right in most Western languages, top to bottom. And you want to make the key message within the slide the largest in terms of things like font size, maybe make it stand out with color, etc. Next point, just the next tip about design is show, don't tell. Okay, so I'm sure all of you have been to presentations or created presentations with slides that have a lot of text within them. And why we do that at times is to give us confidence when we're presenting, so that the information is in the slide there for us. But what you want to do is actually avoid that. As the presenter, you want to show, you don't want to tell within the slide itself. So avoid sentences unless you're quoting. Slides, remember, are simplified visual note cards that capture and reinforce main ideas, not the complete thought itself. So it's always better to use less text and more visuals. This will also save you time when you're actually putting the presentation together as well, but it keeps the audience focused on what you're trying to say. So as the speaker, you should be delivering most of the content and information, not putting it all on the slides for everyone to read. So, for example, representing the data as diagrams, and that type of thing. So it's using some of the, images and illustrations that you can within PowerPoint. What you don't want to do is to distract your audience, because they should be listening to you, not reading the slide word for word. The other thing to think about is have one message per slide. So try and keep a slide to an individual message as opposed to multiple messages. Follow the 6x6 rule. You can do some research, on the internet, just in terms of what's the max number of bullet points you should have on a slide. But generally, if you follow the 6x6 rule, which is the max of 6 bullets per slide and 6 words per bullet, that will help. And you can see I've 6 bullet points on this slide here. Not sure about the six words per bullet. I've maybe slightly gone over on one or two of the points, but yeah, if you can keep that in mind, that will help. And that'll also help with the, thinking about very much the show, don't tell point as well. Choose the right images, so don't think about just throwing an image into a slide just for the sake of it. You need to choose the right image. It needs to be relatable, authentic, and inspirational. Illustrative, but not generic. And it should support what the message is on the slide, not distract from it. You want to inspire and engage your audience with that image on the slide. Number of slides. Yeah, spread out your slides, guys. So don't think about, okay, well, I'm only supposed to have 10 slides within this presentation. Think about spreading out the slides. The problem isn't the number of slides in a presentation, it's the number of objects on the slide. That's what, really people talk about in terms of too many slides in the presentation. It's more relating to the objects on the slides as opposed to the number of slides in the presentation. So if you think about one message per slide, you're following the 6x6 rule, then it enables you to spread out your presentation with multiple slides there. So that leads to a compelling presentation that has content that's clear, easy to understand, uses simple images and language that connect and engage your audience. So space out your slides, space out your information. So just some tips there, and you can see the source there at the bottom of the slide, but just some tips on what should help with your design. So you think about the story that you're telling within your presentation, and then from there in PowerPoint itself, then start to design those slides with the focus on some of these tips then. So What I want to do now is start to talk about some of the how-tos, that I mentioned in the list of topics for the webinar. So I'm going to go back to the what is storytelling slide here. So thinking about this slide I had earlier in the presentation, which was a sentence. Okay, so that's okay because it is ultimately a quote. Another way I could actually show this slide is more visually. And what I could do is turn this slide into a more visual representation of what I'm trying to say. So you can see there, I've thought about the design of the slide from the point of view of with the most Western languages, reading from left to right, top to bottom. The image itself there, it's somebody walking along a path. So storytelling is that path. So it's another way to think about how I could change this slide to a more visual representation of what I'm trying to say. And you may find that your audience will remember the explanation of what storytelling is because of the visual image within this slide. So if I then take an example of the second quote that I had in the presentation earlier, what I could do, and I'm just going to show some how-tos now, what I could do is change this slide and start to think about maybe an image to represent what I'm trying to say. I could still show the quote, but I could show the quote on top of the image. So just from that, I'm going to just come out and do a demonstration then. So I'm now in PowerPoint itself as opposed to the slideshow. So what I could do is take the slide that I have at the moment and insert an image. So in terms of the types of images and illustrations that you have within PowerPoint that you can insert, so you have the image functionality under the Insert tab, where you can choose pictures from your device, stock. So if you're a Microsoft 365 subscriber, you have a world of images that you can select from, or an online picture, which ultimately would be searching the internet for an image. We then also have illustrations that we can use. We're going to come to smart art shortly. So you can use smart art, which will allow you to create diagrams. You can also annotate by using shapes. Also, if you have 3D models, so there are 3D models available if you're a Microsoft 365 subscriber, some stock 3D models, or you can insert a 3D model yourself, and so on. Okay, so you can see you have a wide range of images, illustrations, and also media. Short video clips, for example, can be very beneficial within a presentation. And again, the same options there, this device. Do you have the video file itself, stock videos if you're a Microsoft 365 subscriber, and then online videos. So that'll pick up from online sources like YouTube, Vimeo, etc. So just to demonstrate briefly this slide, just to make it more visual, I'm going to insert a picture. I'm going to just use the stock images. So when I choose stock images, and you can see there, as I said, as a Microsoft 365 subscriber, I have full access to a library of creative content. So I'd be thinking about an illustration that would help reinforce the message within this slide. So I might be looking for something like a light bulb. Okay. Or I could be searching on something like spark. That gives me more sparklers from that point of view. But you can see, excuse me, you can see there, just by simply searching on keywords, which may be part of what you're trying to, the message you're trying to convey within the slide. There's some very useful stock images, but you may already have an image that you want to use within that slide. I'm going to choose this one, this light bulb, to demonstrate this message. Okay, so of course I bring the image in, I'll just do a little bit of resizing there. And then you do need to start to think about placement. Okay, so placement of the image, if you want the text to be displayed, where you want to place that text, etc. So, of course, the image itself, I have the picture format tab there to think about potentially transparency of the image. There are artistic effects there, so there may be something more appropriate that you want to use. I'm going to go with this image with the quote in front of it. So then I need to use functionality which will allow me to arrange objects on the slide. So I'm going to select this image and send it backward. And what I'll do is I'm going to change the font color of this text to maybe white. Okay. You know, and you're starting to think about, just going to, sorry, send back. There we are. So I'm going to send that back, and I can start to change that quote, maybe have the quote here, and so on. So what you're starting to think about is the layout there of the slide, just where you want the text. Do you want it on top of the image? Do you want it to the left of the image, etc.? You can see that previous slide, I had the text to the left of the image. But I'm starting to think about that image. Hopefully, you know, we've got the text there, which is spark curiosity. So you hope that I'll just make that a little bit smaller there. So you'd hope that that image represents what you're trying to say in the message to spark curiosity. So just, you know, I'm naturally probably would do a little bit more work with that slide, but just to get a feel of using illustration then, just tell your story to get that message across then in the presentation itself. Now, I want to go to next slide, because of course you can see I had a number of slides in the presentation which have bulleted text. We talked about the design tip of 6x6. But one thing to think about is, again, make the text more visual. And you can do that by converting the text to a smart art graphic. So that can ultimately make it more relatable to the audience and more memorable to the audience. So in my home tab here, so I have my bulleted text. This is a slide from earlier. And my bulleted text there in the home tab, if I come over to this button, this is the convert text to smart art graphic button. So I can look at the range of smart art graphics that are on offer that probably would lend themselves best to bullet points. So for example, this one I think is probably the best because it gives me that feeling of, first of all, it's a graphic, but secondly, it shows that I am going on a journey in terms of the arrow there. So if I select that, that's ultimately more memorable, more engaging to the audience. So we've got our graphic with the smart art. When you insert it, so when you convert that text to a smart art graphic, you have the flexibility of changing its color. And there are a variety of styles there that you can select from. And also it may be that you've decided, actually, to be honest, there may be a better graphic that I could use. So you can always change the graphic itself and add more to it. So you can add other shapes to that graphic. So smart art is a superb technique of converting those traditional bulleted text slides to more visual graphics then. And your audience will probably find this more engaging and more memorable then. What you can also do is take this graphic and during the presentation itself, I could animate it. So from the presenter point of view, it could be that when I'm presenting this slide, I want to present each part of this slide one by one. So craft the beginning first, then develop the middle, then make the ending powerful. So what I can do is animate the graphic, and you can animate within PowerPoint. It could be bulleted text that you're animating, or it could be parts of a graphic. It could be parts of a chart as well. So you're focusing the audience on that part of the chart bit by bit. So what I can do is add animation. So I'm just going to come into the animations tab here. You can see you have a wide range of animations within PowerPoint available. So you've got entrance animations. So as you're presenting that slide, for example, on the mouse click, how that object comes in ultimately. That's the entrance. Emphasis is more, as you can see, some of those like a pulse to emphasize the point. And you've also exit animations. I'm going to go for just a simple one, an appear entrance animation. Now, what this will do initially is actually just have this animation on the smart art graphic as a whole. You can see this number 1. I'll just demonstrate this actually with the slideshow. Okay, so in the slideshow itself, I'm presented with this slide on the mouse click from the previous one. When I click the mouse, that object comes in as one object. However, what I actually want to do is to have each of these coming in separately. So if I choose effect options, I can choose one by one. And you can see now 1, 2, 3, 4. There's actually 4 elements to this object. There's actually the arrow itself, and then the 3, craft the beginning, develop the middle, make the ending powerful. So now the slide becomes this with animation. Arrow in first, that's your journey of your story, craft the beginning, and you can talk about each of those points as you click your mouse. Okay, so you can see animation can really bring the slide to life. Now, one thing just to make you aware, for those of you that aren't aware, the difference between transitions and animations, because there can be confusion between the two. Transition is how each slide will appear when you're in the slideshow. Okay, so that's how each slide comes in from slide to slide. That's a transition. Whereas animation is within the slide itself. So you think about the objects on the slide. So even if I go back to, for example, this slide, there's actually quite a few objects. You have your title, you have the image, you have this text box and another text box here. So actually you can order how each of those objects come into the slide. But the great thing about animation then is, as you saw with the smart art graphic, I can actually take a graphic like this and have each part of the object come in separately. And that would be the same, for example, if you had a list of bullet points, as I said earlier, a chart, you can have each of the theories coming in separately and so on. So transitions is from slide to slide. So if I just add a transition, so for example, I'll just go for, you can see there's subtle transitions, exciting, dynamic content. So I'll just go for a push transition. I can then choose the effect options there. In other words, the direction to push. So I might push from the left. That's only going to do that for this slide. I can then apply it to all, which means then when I deliver the presentation, so if I just start the presentation with a slideshow, you can see the push transition there. So that's how each slide comes in. That's what a transition is. And then, as I said earlier, I'll just go back to where we were, this one. Animation is the objects within the slide. So just that distinction between those two. So that's our design ideas. Okay, so thinking about the layout, which I'm going to now go into the master slide to show you more about it. I'm thinking about slide layouts. We have thinking about, I'll just go back to this slide here, choosing your fonts wisely. So remember, keep to those sans serif fonts like Tahoma, Verdana, Helvetica, but also think about the size of the font. Show, don't tell. So, you can see that I turned some of those slides into more visual slides as opposed to just bulleted text there, following the 6x6 rule, trying to choose the right image. That's really going to convey the message from the slide, and then spread out your slides. Don't be afraid. I could have very easily have added the 2 quotes onto one slide, but spread it out. Okay, spread the slides out. So what I want to discuss now with you is the slide layout. That can be extremely important within your visual storytelling within PowerPoint. So you've crafted your story. You want to show that story visually within the PowerPoint presentation. Thinking about some of those design ideas, what you want to think about potentially is a type of layout that's going to convey visually the message in the slide. So what you may think about is that quite a few of your slides will have text on the left and an image to the right. There's no title to the slide, so you're starting to think about, well, I use that type of layout quite a bit. So what you can do is you can actually create your own slide layouts. Now, you will have, you can open up PowerPoint into a blank presentation, just if I do this now. So if I was opening up a new blank presentation, these are the slide layouts available here, okay, out of the box with PowerPoint. So you got your title slide. Most of your slides will tend to be the title and content layout, okay, but you can see there are other layouts available as well, okay. So got a section header and so on to content comparison. So you've those slide layouts available to you by default.
You're not showing us, sorry, you're not showing us what you're talking about there.
Oh, sorry, let me just, thank you. Let me stop sharing there for a minute then. Yeah, so what I've probably done is just share the individual, the first presentation. So yeah, thanks for letting me know there. That's me. Okay, yeah, so in a new blank presentation, what I was saying, guys, was that if you think about the new blank presentation, there will be specific slide layouts available out of the box with PowerPoint. So you've got your title slide, which of course your first slide always is that layout. Most of your slides probably will be title and content. You've got, for example, to content, you've got section headers, etc. So those are what you have available out of the box. Okay. If I then switch into the presentation that I have been taking you through, this is ShareSkills have our own template for PowerPoint presentations. So what you can see here is I have quite a few templates, quite a few slide layouts, to use the correct term, within this template to use, okay? But sometimes what you're looking for, and there's a particular layout that you use on a regular basis, as I said, you maybe want text to the left, you want an image to the right, and you're using that over and over again. What you can actually do is create a layout from scratch, or even edit an existing layout. And that's achieved through the master slide. Okay, so I'm going to just show you some of this functionality. So let me just go into the view tab here in the ribbon, and then into slide master. Okay, so within slide master, at the very top, okay, I will have the overall master, which, for example, if I wanted the company logo on every slide, and I mean every slide layout, you would add that to the overall slide master there, okay? But then what you have are these individual layouts, okay? So these are all individual layouts. These are what you see when you're in the home tab, and then that, sorry, I'll just close out of that. So those layouts are what you see here, okay? So I'll just go back into view and slide master. So I'm looking at all of these individual layouts, okay? So what I might decide is, well, look, there is a particular layout that I use on a regular basis. So I can actually insert a layout. So I'm in the slide master tab, because I'm in the slide master at the moment. I can insert a layout. And from there, what I can do is I can start to think about, for example, what placeholders, as they're called, these are placeholders here, what placeholders do I want to include in the slide layout? So I have a variety of placeholders. So I might want to put, as I said, maybe text to the left and an image to the right. So if I come into insert placeholder, you can see there I have a variety of placeholders to choose from. Content would be just like the title and content slide layout. So that content can be anything from you want to insert text, or you want to insert a picture or a chart, etc. Or what I actually will do is, as I said, I'm going to maybe have text to the left. Okay, so I can draw. And then I'm going to go back to the right. insert a picture placeholder. Okay, now I'm not going to spend too long trying to lay it out, but you can, it's just to give you a flavor of this. So what I've done is I've created a layout which will have a title, bulleted text potentially, and an image to the right. And if I use that layout on a regular basis, that will save me time, actually trying to, when I'm designing the presentation, create slides with that type of content on a regular basis, because the slide layout's there for me. The other thing, of course, I could do is start to think about background colors as well. Okay, so I might want to choose an overall, different type of color for your background, your text, etc. I'm just going to choose a background style just to get a flavor of this. I'll just go with, some of those are quite dark. I'll just go with this one. And so on. I can then rename the master slide. Sorry, the slide layout. So I'll just call this 2-column layout. And rename. And when I close out of the master view now, what it means is if I want to insert a new slide, I can now select my new layout. So that will help from the point of view of thinking about the layout of your slides within the presentation to help you tell the story. If you've essentially slides with the same layout and you're using that type of layout on a regular basis, if there's not a layout available here, create one. Okay, so that's just the view and slide master. I did that within. So another way to help with the visual storytelling within PowerPoint, thinking about creating or editing existing layouts as well. Now, one thing I want to mention to you, and I've already done within this particular presentation, but sections. Sections are extremely useful in terms of thinking about, we go back to the structure of your presentation like a story. So what you can do to help you as the presenter is when you're designing the presentation in PowerPoint, you can actually break the slide deck into sections. And I've actually done this already within this presentation. So I've got my summary section, which I'm actually using what's called a summary zoom slide. I'll show you now what that looks like actually when I run the presentation. So if I deliver that presentation from the beginning, I know I'm in, as you can see there, you're seeing presenter mode here, but this is the Zoom slide here. So what it means is that I can go to a section by clicking on it, and that will jump me into that section. And when I go through the slides to the end of that section, it always takes me back to the Zoom slide. So that's the Zoom slide. It's in what's called the summary section. I then have a section which are the introduction slides. I have a section, what is storytelling. So you could think about then the structure of presentation as a story and actually use sections to help you with that. So, to craft the beginning, develop the middle, and then the end. So sections are really, really useful. The functionality for sections, just to let you know where that is, it's in the Home tab. Okay, the Home tab and the ribbon, this is where you can actually organize your slide deck into sections, and that can really help with your storytelling, particularly as the presenter, as you develop that presentation. The summary Zoom slide, by the way, that I have used here, it can be very useful. It'll also build sections for you within the presentation. So you can see techniques that help just design your presentation to tell that story visually. The other thing as well, just to finish off, because I'm just looking at the time just to get some Q&As in. One other thing to think about is if you're using the later versions of Microsoft PowerPoint in the Home tab, you've got the designer. Let Microsoft PowerPoint give you design ideas, because what I can do is even just this example here, the webinar topics. If you look at the design ideas, what it's actually doing here for me is not only just making it more visual from the point of view of giving me, instead of the traditional bullet points, it's more like actually like a smart art graphic. For example, this one here. These ones actually, if you look at this, what it's doing is it's picking up what you're bullet point is about and actually trying to give you an image. You know, so do have a look at Designer as well, because Designer will give you some ideas on how better to design your slides. So I would always tend to have a look. Some of these you can see there's no difference there, they're just bulleted text, but yeah, there's a nice one there, as opposed to your bulleted text. So another way to visually represent, particularly something like a bulleted slide. So guys, that's really all I want to cover for today. I'm just looking at the time here just to get some Q&As before we wrap up. So let me just stop sharing.
Right, can you stop the recording?